You've been optimizing your surface. He stopped caring about his surface 30 years ago. That's the gap you don't know how to measure. There's a quality some men carry. You've felt it before, even if you couldn't name it. You're in a room with someone, he's not the tallest, not the richest as far as you can tell, not the loudest. He might be wearing something ordinary, he might not have said a word yet, but something about his presence rearranges the air. Not dramatically, just quietly. The way a room feels different when someone turns the thermostat down 2 degrees. You can't point to it, but your body registers it. That's not charisma. Charisma is performed. What he has is something older than that. You're 25, maybe younger, maybe 28. You've been working on yourself. You've put in real effort, the gym, the reading, the discipline, the habits. You've studied the architecture of confidence. You understand the theory. And yet there are moments in conversations, in rooms, in relationships where something is missing, where the version of you that shows up feels slightly less solid than the version you carry in your head. You can't fake your way past that gap. You've already tried. The man who's 60, the one who carries that quality, he doesn't have that gap. Not because he has no doubts, but because his relationship with his doubts is fundamentally different from yours. That difference is what we're going to trace, layer by layer. Because once you understand the structure of what he has, you'll stop trying to copy the surface of it, and you'll start understanding what it actually costs. The first layer is what most men see. They see a man who doesn't fidget, who speaks without rushing, who holds eye contact without it feeling like a contest, who disagrees without apologizing for disagreeing. And they think that's composure, that's confidence. I can learn that. So they practice the posture, the slower speech, the steady gaze, and it works for a moment, in controlled situations. But underneath the practiced stillness, the noise is still running, the calculation is still happening, the performance is still being managed. The man who's 60 doesn't manage the performance. There is no performance. That's not a small distinction. That's the entire thing. Here's what composure actually is, not the dictionary version, but the structural version. Composure is what happens when a man's sense of self is no longer dependent on what's about to happen next. At 25, almost everything you feel about yourself is downstream of outcomes. She responded, good. She didn't, recalibrate. The room respected you, solid. The room didn't, internal damage assessment begins. You don't always show this. You've gotten good at not showing it, but it's running constantly, quietly in the background of every moment. That background process consumes more than you know. It shapes the way you enter rooms. It shapes the weight behind your words. It shapes whether your presence feels settled or slightly pressurized. People don't read this consciously, but they read it. There's a stage, and not every man reaches it, where the feedback loop starts to break. Not because a man stops caring about outcomes, but because he's had enough outcomes, good and bad, that outcomes stop being the primary source of information about who he is. He succeeded at things and discovered the success didn't fix what he thought it would fix. He's failed at things and discovered the failure didn't destroy what he thought it would destroy. That empirical history, that accumulated proof, does something to the nervous system that no mindset work can replicate. It quiets something, not forever, not completely, but enough. Enough that he stops bracing for every moment before it arrives. Enough that he stops needing to control the impression he makes before he makes it. That quietness, that stillness, is what you feel in a man who carries real gravity. You can't read a book to get there. You can't meditate your way into it over a weekend. It was purchased with time, with real loss, with the kind of friction that leaves marks. Now we go deeper. There's something beneath the composure, something that took longer to build. It's an internal standard, not a performance standard, not about how he looks to others, an actual standard, a set of principles he operates from that exist independently of whether anyone is watching. At 25, most men's standards are audience dependent. The best version of them shows up when someone they respect is present, when stakes are visible, when the performance matters. Alone, in small moments, In decisions no one will ever know about, the standard drops. Not to chaos, but it drops. The man who's 60, who carries himself the way he does, his behavior in private is structurally close to his behavior in public, not because he's performing for himself, because the internal standard became real enough over years that it runs without supervision. That's integrity. Not in the moral lecture sense, in the engineering sense. Integrity means the structure is the same under load as it is at rest. It means the private man and the public man are nearly the same man. You can feel that in someone, not because they announce it, but because the consistency radiates. There's no seam between what they say and what they do, between how they treat the person they need and how they treat the person they don't. That seamlessness is extremely rare, and it's felt before it's understood. Here's the layer that most men in the self-improvement space skip entirely. It has to do with failure, not surviving failure, processing it. Young men, when they fail, tend to do one of two things. They either build armor, I don't care, it doesn't matter, I'm not affected, or they collapse inward and let the failure become part of their identity. Both responses leave residue. The armor makes them brittle, the collapse makes them small. The man who's 60, who carries that real weight, who's been through significant loss and came out the other side as himself, not as a harder version or a diminished version, that man did a third thing. He sat with the failure long enough to understand it, to let it change him without letting it define him, to extract something real from the experience without performing a lesson for anyone else. That process, repeated over decades, loss absorbed, understood, carried forward cleanly, produces a particular kind of solidity. You can't manufacture it, you can't accelerate it by consuming more content about it. It requires the failures to happen, and it requires you to not run from them when they do. We're at the deepest layer now. It's the relationship a man has with his own incompleteness. At 25, incompleteness feels like a problem to be solved. There are gaps between who you are and who you intend to be, and those gaps produce a low-level urgency that colors everything. The urgency isn't bad in itself, it drives growth, but it also drives a kind of restlessness that makes it impossible to be fully present in any given moment. You're always slightly somewhere else, in the next version of yourself, in the future where the gaps are closed, in the outcome that will prove you've arrived. The man who's 60, the one you felt in that room, he made a different peace. Not with mediocrity, he didn't give up, but at some point the war with his own incompleteness ended. He understood, through experience, not philosophy, that the incompleteness doesn't close, it just changes shape. And fighting it doesn't make you more whole, it makes you more exhausted. He stopped fighting, he started operating. And in that shift, from fighting yourself to operating from yourself, something fundamental changes. The restlessness drops, the presence arrives, the weight becomes something other people can actually feel. Here's the part that stays with you. Everything described here, the composure, the internal standard, the way failure was processed, the peace with incompleteness, none of it was given to him. He didn't choose to be 60. He didn't choose the losses that shaped him, but he did choose in small ways, across thousands of moments, to not take the easy exit. Not to perform calm when he felt chaos, to actually build it. Not to announce his standards, to quietly live them. Not to skip the grief and go straight to the lesson, to actually feel the thing. Those micro-choices, compounded over time, produced the man in the room. And this is where your choice sits. You can study the surface of what he has, the posture, the cadence, the aesthetic, and you'll be convincing. Or you can understand that what you felt in that room wasn't a style. It was a life, lived in a particular direction, under real pressure, without flinching. That direction is available to you. It's just not available as a shortcut. At 25, you can begin building what he has, but you cannot fake it. Not because you're not capable, because the real thing isn't made of technique. It's made of time and what you choose to do inside it.